I have seen a lot in my 40 years on this bench. I have watched the rich walk in like they own the room. I have watched the powerful try to use their title as a shield. But what walked into my courtroom on the morning of November 14th at exactly 10:30 a.m. was something I had never seen before. A 32-year-old man who shoved a 71-year-old Vietnam veteran to the ground in broad daylight and then stood before me, arms crossed, with a smirk on his face that told me he expected to walk right back out. And somewhere in the back of that courtroom, sitting in civilian clothes, was his father, a man with a badge, a reputation, and 35 years of service. And what that father did next made the entire courtroom go completely silent. If you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is going to change the way you think about power, privilege, and what real love actually looks like. The case file in front of me seemed explosive enough on the surface. My clerk had handed it to me that morning with a look I recognized. The look she gets when a case has already made the local news before it reaches my bench. I read it twice before I even put on my robe. State versus Marcus Holt, case number 2024-CR4417, assault and battery on an elderly person. The defendant was Marcus Holt, age 32. The victim was James Calloway, age 71, a Vietnam veteran, a retired school teacher, a grandfather of 4, a man who had spent 2 tours in the Mekong Delta so that people like Marcus Holt could live in a country where the law is supposed to mean something. Let me tell you about James Calloway before I tell you about what happened that morning in the park. Because in cases like this, it matters who the victim is. Not because some victims deserve more justice than others. Every human being deserves equal protection under the law. But because the full weight of what was done to James Calloway cannot be understood without understanding the life that was risked. James enlisted in 1971 at 18 years old. He served with the 101st Airborne Division, 2 full tours, came home with a Purple Heart and a limp in his left leg that never went away. After the military, he spent 30 years teaching high school history in a public school in the same city where he grew up. He coached baseball on weekends. He volunteered at the Veterans Support Center on Tuesdays. He walked his dog, an old golden retriever named Sergeant, through Riverside Park every single morning at 8:15. That was his routine, his peace, his corner of the world. On November 11th, Veterans Day, Marcus Holt was driving his black Mercedes through the Park Road at over 50 miles per hour in a 15-mile-per-hour zone. Sergeant pulled toward the road. James stepped to the curb and raised his hand, the universal signal. Slow down. Just slow down. Marcus didn't slow down. He stopped. He put the car in park, stepped out onto the pavement, walked straight to James Calloway, and shoved that 71-year-old man so hard he hit the ground and didn't get back up on his own. James suffered a fractured wrist, 2 bruised ribs, and a severe concussion. He spent 3 nights in the hospital. When the paramedics arrived, he was still on the ground, trying to sit up, too proud to stay flat on his back in public. 3 witnesses called 911. All 3 gave the same account. Marcus Holt stood over James on the ground and said, and I want you to hear these exact words, "Next time, old man, keep your hands to yourself. My father runs this city. You have no idea who you just messed with." Then he got back in his Mercedes and drove away. Now, before I tell you what Marcus Holt looked like when he walked into my courtroom, before I tell you what he said when he opened his mouth, and what happened when his arrogance finally met something it couldn't move, I want you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever witnessed someone use their family's name to escape accountability? Have you ever stood by and watched power protect itself? Tell me, because what you're about to see is the answer to that question, and it's not what you'd expect. And while you're down there, subscribe to this channel. Less than 5% of people watching are subscribed. If you believe that badges should mean responsibility and not immunity, hit that button right now. You are going to want to see what happens next. Marcus Holt walked in the real kind, the kind that comes from finally understanding something you should have understood a long time ago. He was 32 years old, and for the first time in his life, the scaffolding had come down. The name, the connections, the assumption that consequence was something that happened to other people. All of it was gone, and what was left was just a man who would hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt, standing in a courtroom where his father had just chosen justice over him. That is a hard thing to watch. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I don't enjoy this part of the job. I never have, but I believe in it. I've sat on this bench for 4 decades. I've seen the best and worst of what people are capable of. But what I watched Chief Holt do that morning, stand up in open court in front of his son, in front of cameras, and choose justice over protection, that is the standard. That is what wearing a badge is supposed to mean. 6 months later, Marcus Holt completed his first 100 hours at the Veterans Support Center. His supervisor there, a woman named Carol Devins, who had been running that center for 18 years, filed a report with the court. She wrote that, in the beginning, he showed up with the posture of someone who thought he was better than the room. He stood near the door. He answered questions with as few words as possible. He did the minimum of what was asked and nothing more. By week 4, something shifted. She wasn't sure what caused it. Maybe a specific conversation, maybe just the accumulated weight of being around men who had given everything and received very little in return. But he started staying an extra hour each Tuesday to sit with veterans who had no family visitors. He started arriving early. He started learning names. By month 3, he knew every man in that center, by name, by branch, by the year they served. He remembered who liked their coffee with 2 sugars. He remembered which men needed help with their paperwork, and which men just needed someone to sit quietly beside them. Carol Devins wrote, "I don't know what happened to this young man in a courtroom, but whatever it was, it worked." James Calloway wrote me a letter. He said Marcus came to find him on a Tuesday afternoon. They sat on a bench outside the center. Marcus apologized. Not the lawyer's version, not the performance, the real thing. James said it took Marcus about 15 minutes to get through it because he kept stopping, and James let him stop. And then he told Marcus about Vietnam, about what it feels like to come home to a country that wasn't sure it wanted you back, about learning to find your peace in small things, a morning walk, a good dog, a park you know by heart. James wrote at the end of his letter, "I think that young man is going to be all right. I think his father's choice that day was the best thing that ever happened to him, and I think my dog would have liked him." I will never forget that sentence. I will never forget Chief Holt walking down that center aisle, or James Calloway standing with his brace and his Purple Heart and his quiet voice that carried across a silent room. I will never forget that the law, when it's applied with both firmness and dignity, can do something a prison sentence alone never could. It can change someone. It doesn't always. I want to be honest about that. Not every Marcus Holt becomes the person who stays late to sit with veterans. Some of them leave the courtroom and go right back to who they were. But some of them don't. And that possibility, that a single decision, a single moment of real accountability can redirect a life, is why I still put this robe on every morning. My father came to this country with nothing. He worked construction. He used to say that the law is the great equalizer, the one place where a man with no money and a man with every advantage in the world stand on the same ground. He believed that. I have spent my career trying to make that true, not just as a principle, but as a practice. And cases like this one remind me that it is possible. That when a father chooses honor over protection, when a veteran stands quietly with a brace on his wrist and speaks with grace instead of anger, when a young man who thought he was untouchable finally sits with the weight of what he did, the law can be what it's supposed to be. That is the lesson here. Not the dramatic moment when Chief Holt walked down that aisle. Not the sentence, not even the footage. The lesson is that the most powerful thing in any courtroom is not the gavel. It's character. It's the choice each person makes about who they want to be when the moment comes that actually tests them. James Calloway had that character. He walked in with his brace and his Purple Heart and his quiet dignity, and he told a room full of strangers that he didn't want revenge. He wanted understanding. Chief Raymond Holt had that character. He walked in knowing it would cost him something, and he did it anyway. And Marcus Holt, I believe, is learning it. Late, painfully, but learning it. That is enough. In my experience, that is everything. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you believe that no one is above the law, not the wealthy, not the connected, not the children of people in power, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, because these are the stories that need to be told, that need to be heard, that need to be shared with the people in your life who still believe in accountability. And leave me a comment telling me, what would you have done if you were sitting in that gallery the morning Chief Holt walked down that aisle? What would you have done if Marcus had been your son? Because I genuinely want to know. Justice is not just what happens in a courtroom. It is the choice every one of us makes when someone we love does something wrong, when someone we know uses power they shouldn't have, when we have a chance to stand up or to look away. Choose wisely. Every single time. Choose wisely.